Strong Dads wants to thank 4Speed on 50 for sponsoring today's show. If you like classic cars, great food, and a taste of Americana, you have to visit 4Speed on 50's Diner, located on Route 50 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Stop in today for a meal and an experience you won't soon forget at 4Speed on 50's Diner. Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson along with Carl Andre. Carl, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's really good to be here with you. I enjoy doing these with you.
I enjoy them too.
Yeah.
Well, you take me kind of deep because I'm not very deep to begin with. So just
Mile
the fact
wide
that,
and
yeah.
deep. I don't think that's true, but if that makes you feel better.
Yeah. Well, we have good conversation, and Kyle and I, we used to always talk, and we've said this before. Prior to recording, we have a little, and pardon me if this offends you, but we have a little talk foreplay, right? Like,
yeah.
Like we warm up our brain,
Yeah.
and it is amazing sometimes those conversations. Sometimes it's like, okay, we better go get recording because
Right.
you're getting yourself going and thinking and going to different avenues and things you didn't think about and all that. And I think that right there it's just kind of fun, So
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
But today, before we talk about today, our last show,
Yeah.
Proverbs 31,
Yeah.
honoring our wives. Or I forget the exact title.
What
now.
is a Proverbs 31 woman?
yeah.
And honoring. How do you encourage that and things like that?
That thing's getting hit?
It's getting some hits, and I've gotten some responses.
Yeah.
Mostly
Now,
from women.
Well, you know why? How did we start that show? Women.
But if you didn't watch it, guys, I would say go back and watch that. It's one of the women we were talking about that said it's perhaps her favorite show, and they've seen a lot of these that we've done together. They've been following that, and it's a very rich. I think we did a really good job on that at covering it, and it dovetails nicely into this.
Yeah. So today we are going to kind of dovetail on the idea of are you providing what she needs? Again, so this is Strong Dads. We're talking to men who are married, and the idea of are we providing? And you came up with some things. So the way we're going to actually play this a little bit is you're going to interview me because this is something that I found in our work at Rock Solid Families, and I work with a lot of couples, and there's still a mindset by a lot of us men that I'll just say, if you can remember, like back in the 1950s, I bring home a check, honey. What else do you need? You know, and that just doesn't cut it quite like maybe it did back then. So, with that being said,
well, it probably didn't cut it back then.
Right.
It was an excuse possibly that a lot of men used. I'm working hard. What else do you want from me? I think that's a common refrain too.
Well, thus the lazy boy.
Yeah.
The lazy.
No
lazy boy
item other than the invisible fence. There's been very few products so aptly named for what they do. The lazy boy chair.
Why didn't they call it lazy woman or girl? Or no, they call it lazy boy.
Oh, wow. We should get that changed.
Good luck. Yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you what. If you don't mind, I'll just jump in. You want to do your sponsors?
Yeah, let's thank our sponsors and we'll get rolling. Okay, so we want to thank our sponsors: Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. So we do continue to thank those guys and just want to be grateful with some gratitude towards them. Also, just you guys listening, we continue to thank you. Do us a favor. I know that this is always a weird ask, but you got to give us some likes. You got to give us some 5-star ratings. You got to give us some thumbs up because that's how things come up in search engines. And so that I guess we could pay a lot of money.
Yeah, we could do that.
But no, just give us 5 stars, okay? So that's a little easier.
And share it. I think a lot of times people, like with that Proverbs 31 woman, I sent that to a newly married individual, a man, and I sent it to somebody about to be married. I think it's that important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why don't you fire at me a little bit, and we'll walk through some of this, and I'll steer you through at least a little bit of how I might handle some of what we're going to talk about today.
Sure, and I'll just share. When we talked about this, we were kicking this topic around as a dovetail to Proverbs 31 woman. I admit, my first thought was financial provision and a secure environment. And I thought, and I believe in being an encourager and trying to create that atmosphere. So I was a little bit slim. And some of the future topics we've talked about is what it means to be a good worker Well, those kinds of things. So I thought maybe we should dovetail that in. I even ask you about that,
Right.
Because I was a little concerned, as far as the content. But then in talking with you, you talk about how you've walked through this exercise with a lot of couples. I'm going to ask you a question I didn't prep you for, and it may not seem relevant, but how many hours do you think you've spent counseling couples?
Gosh, I don't even know. I could actually figure that out per Rock Solid Families because we actually keep those statistics. I don't know, probably, thousands. Thousands.
Couples, if you put it in couples terms, how many couples? It's well into the hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
Well into that.
Yeah, well into that.
Right.
I'll say something that I'm probably proud's not the right word, but I'm going to use it. I'm more proud about is the number of men, because it's hard to get men in to get help.
True.
And so the number of men now that are walking in, and I shared that with you before, I share anxiety and my issues, my struggles with anxiety, and the number of men that have walked through the door, and within 5 seconds, somehow we're talking about anxiety or whatever. And I'm like, There's no placard out on the front of our building that says, come see me with anxiety issues,
right.
So just the idea that I get to work with a lot of men. And I also think, you and I, we've talked about this. I come from a blue collar background. My dad was a mechanic.
Yeah.
Me and my brothers, we all grew up in a shop. I'm at least pretty familiar with tools, building things and breaking things. And, just being able to connect with the average guy on that level,
that's great,
makes him, maybe some people don't like this, but our office is not very clinical. You're going to come in and we're going to talk about stuff. And so I just say that because we get to see a lot of guys, a lot of regular guys.
I think things have changed a little bit too. I'm a John Wayne fan.
Yeah.
That era that you just don't talk.
Right.
That kind of thing. So I can imagine that you go to anxiety right off because they probably have a lot of it walking through the door.
They do.
But
the
point I was getting at is you've done this with so many people. You've got such a depth to draw from that I'm excited to work through this and hear your perspective on it. So, going back to what we talked about before we actually started rolling the camera, you said an interesting thing about when women come in, it's not about what a lot of guys think it's going to be about.
Right. Well, when we talk about provision, a lot of guys will have it in their head right off the bat that it's finances and security and that kinds of thing. And my point is it may have happened a time or two, but almost never does it come in when they're getting ready to divorce because somebody says he doesn't make enough money or the house isn't secure. I guess it's occurred. And you brought up a point like, well, but finances is a big reason why people divorce.
Right.
But one of my points to that is it's a pretty slim number of couples where both aren't working. So now provision financially is really a team effort, where 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was more singular. And most people are divorcing financially for financial reasons, not on how much they make, but how much they spend or terrible spending habits, the trouble they've gotten themselves in. But so that always led me to believe okay, we're missing the boat here on something. Physical needs, especially in the United States, for the most part.
And define what you're talking about when you say physical needs, right?
Yeah, so food, water, shelter, clothing, like the physical needs. Those physical needs, which you could go back some years and it's like, gosh, just to have a safe place to live or just to have a roof over your head. You've heard those phrases. Yes, that's out there as a concern, but not nearly like it used to be.
Right.
So many of those things are provided for.
Basics.
Yeah.
They're staples. They're not something to be aspiring for. They're a part of everyday life for almost everybody.
And much easier to get. And somebody might say, oh, easy for you. No, but a whole lot easier than it might have been 100 years ago. Okay. So, but what does happen is they're coming in all the time and you quickly go, oh, needs aren't being met. And this led me to, there's other work out there about this, but I like to work in my own theories and stuff like, well, how does this make sense to me? And I came up with my own list, my own words of 8 emotional needs.
Okay.
Because the ladies are, and the men, and we're going to get into that a little bit, are coming in saying, I'm starving to death.
Yeah.
In these areas, okay?
Right.
And by the way, the men are starving too, but men are really terrible about putting a word on the feeling or the emotion.
Or feeling good about expressing that.
Yeah. And sometimes just not even having the whereabouts to do it, and other than I'm just mad right now.
Yeah,
but really,
something's not right.
Yeah, let's go a little deeper. And well, what are you mad about? And not having enough sex, or not having this, or not having. Oh, okay.
Or she doesn't respect me.
Yeah,
It's a big one.
Yeah.
So let me back up real quick. I'll say that from the money end of it, and I'd say this a lot on these podcasts of teaching financial peace, I'm with you. The vast majority of the problems in money fights and things like that are because the money is not being allocated or spent well. It's not being managed. They're not telling their money. So if you're having money fights and things, I just say that you might want to look into that. And like you said, I've been astounded at how much money some people make only to be broke. So it's not that if you just had more money, I'll be happy kind of thing. That never really plays out.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll share, somebody who was very dear to me, about 20 years into their marriage, the wife had an affair. And it's probably about 15 years after that, we were riding in the car, and I said, so how did you get past that? How did you get over that? They ended up being married over 60 years. And I said, how did you get by, over all the things? And he just said, I had to admit that I wasn't taking care of things at home. And I thought that was one of his best moments, that he didn't put the blame on this, that, and the other, her, or anything like that. He owned up to, I wasn't taking care of things at home.
That's right. Yeah.
And a lot, when I looked at your list, I think it was the very things that you've got listed. So why don't we jump into this, how you work through this? And you see here, you want me to list the emotional needs, or would you like to read them?
So, I can read them, but what I'll do too is I'll put this in the notes on the YouTube or the podcast so that you could look them. But if you have a pen or pencil handy and some paper, right? These are just my words. There are other psychological terms that could be used here. But these are kind of the words that I've come through. And so here are the emotional needs that everybody has, all right? And so one is control. Everybody has to have a level of control in their life. Like when they come into me, I often hear, I feel like my life's out of control. So
real quick, I've heard that that's one of the biggest determining factors in your sense of happiness. Is some idea that you have control. And when you have no control, they've done that with those babies and the pulling the string kind of thing, and when it's tied to something that they get a reward from, everything's great. So we're not really much different than that. So that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, control. Love. So love is. And by the way, there's 2 very different understandings of love.
Right.
But the feeling of love, like I am of value, there's somebody that cares for me. You do occasionally hear of these people who, and I've thought about doing this at times, but I don't think I'd last long. I'm just done with the world. I'm going to go out to the mountains in Montana and be a mountain man for the next 30 years. And there are, I'm sure, individuals who could do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a quick road to the crazy house.
Yeah, you start talking to yourself a lot. Other personalities probably emerge.
So you got to have some sort of feeling like somebody cares about you and that you're worthy to be cared for. Okay. You mentioned one of these earlier, respect.
Oh yeah,
respect, and this is a huge emotional need for a man. Not that a woman can handle being disrespected, not at all. Right, but I'm sure we've talked about the book Love and Respect.
It's my favorite when it comes to a wedding or a marriage type of book. I would highly recommend that. It's so spot on. I think
that was a game changer for me in the counseling world. Because Emerson Eggerichs, who wrote that book, was one of the first men who called out the culture and said, stop making men women.
Right.
Not in those words so much.
Trying to get in touch with your feminine side or something. That's not
like,
what, no.
No, like Carl's a meathead because he's a meathead, right? So let him be a meathead, But the idea that we're trying to get a man to be a woman so that she understands him more is counter to what he even understands how to do, and it's not him. Right. But respect, right? respect is so big. Like I love using this. Like I would never, I
would never. That never's a big word.
I'd never look at you and say, Carl, I love you. But I would go over and I would compliment what you've done.
Right.
Check out that car you restored.
Look at that.
Check out, and that is love to a man, right? Like you respect me. And so, like, there's nothing worse than being around a group of men and feel disrespected.
Oh,
right, like
smacked down in front of everybody. I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the love, so to speak, for a man. Whereas a woman, that's not as much of the issue. Okay, and trust, man. Like, trust is number 4 on my list. But when we're talking about relationships, if you haven't pegged out trust, right? If trust is not in the highest of levels, we're going to have problems. We're going to have problems. And sometimes, I'll have guys who come in and I've never had an affair. I've never done this and never done that. But I know this sounds silly, but you've never finished anything you've started. You're always late. You're, like these little things finally make her say, yeah, I'm not going to give you any task because you just don't do anything, right? And you think, why don't you trust me? Well, dude, like.
As I step over everything you've not finished to get to you, right?
Yeah. And so there's just those kind of things that come into play.
That's interesting.
Security. Lynn and I joke about this all the time. I could go to bed every night and never even check a door in the house, whether it's locked or not. But I check all the doors in the house because she would freak out. Right. So I have a gun in the house. What else do I need? Right.
Well,
the problem is I'll probably sleep right
I was going to say
it.
you have to wake up to use it, kind of thing.
Yeah. So security is a very different understanding out of male and female. Affection, all right, you and I joked about this. When I'm in a session and I say the word affection and I say, so, okay, man, like you over there, affection, what's that mean? What word is going to come in the first, like, one word?
For most guys, it's sex.
Sex.
Right.
Sex is going to come in, and I will tell you almost never. It'll come in somewhere, but it'll be down lower in the list. It's usually being close to you, holding hands from the lady side, holding hands, spending time together, hugging, cuddling. I hear that word. I'm like, cuddling? What the heck,
That sounds kind of like a teddy bear or something like that.
And so the idea here, we have 2 different understandings. My 7th one here for you is purpose. And, here's something that we talked about before. In our last show about the Proverbs 31 woman, how the feminine culture took the purpose out of being a mom. They said, you no longer have a purpose. Yeah. You're worthless.
Or what you're doing is not good.
It's not purposeful.
You're not living up to what women should be. You're actually making the side that's out there doing something look bad.
Yeah. Which made women second guess, I need to get a job. I need to be a contributor to this house, as if they weren't already. But we swept the purpose out from under them, so they started second guessing themselves.
Yeah.
What good am I?
Right.
And so we all have to have a purpose. I don't define a purpose for another person. They all have to say, what I do, I feel like is meaningful. Okay.
Right.
So we all have to have a level of purpose. And the last one is faith. And so at our office, we work, we call ourselves a Christian ministry, but we don't, if somebody says I'm an atheist, we don't close the door on them, right? So, but whether you're an atheist or you are a Christian or whatever, everybody has faith. Everybody has to have faith, right? Whether it's faith in you, like I can do all things, right? Or whether it's faith in God, or whether it's faith in an insurance policy or faith in education.
I used to say you get in a car and you think of all the moving parts that's happening there, and you hurtle down the road at 60 miles an hour, passing people in the other lane. That is an act of faith, that everything stays together, everything's going to work like it's supposed to. Or when you walk in and just turn on a light switch.
Yeah.
You expect the electricity to be there. Everybody's people, they're people of faith. We're all people of faith.
Right.
The sun will come up in the morning and everything like that. So we plan our lives around faith.
Yeah. And so anyway, I list those out. These are emotional connections or needs that have to be satisfied. But I do want to get into the next part of this, and this is where both men and women, we mess it up, or we mess it up, and never with intention. I don't see that people are mean that way. What I see is we just don't get it. Right. So what I like to do is I like to say, okay, so I gave you these emotional needs, but now let's see if we can get an understanding of how to go about providing for each other.
Well, I think too. I don't know if you're getting ready to say that. Your statement about thinking of it as food.
That's where I want to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, a great example.
Yeah. So because food is a physical need. And it's very easy for we've heard about food for a long time and calories and expenditures, and at your body size versus my body size. If I looked at you, if I need 2,200 calories and we find out you need 3,000 calories just to maintain and do what we do every day, for me to look at you and say, Carl, you need to have 2,200 calories.
Well, the doctor did.
Yeah. Well,
I know what you're saying.
You pay him to say that, right?
No,
you pay him to
I would
beat you
never
up.
pay somebody to tell me to stop eating so much.
But the idea that we would project what we need onto somebody else in the world of food is just insanity.
Right.
That's why even when I look at the government recommendations, a 2,000 calorie diet, is a recommended daily allowance, and you're like,
right,
what was that about?
Yeah,
right?
That doesn't take into account the amount of muscle a person has, the level of activity they've got. It's just blanket marker thing that they write on everybody.
You get me on a tangent. BMIs.
Oh, yeah.
One of the worst measurements in the history of mankind. Both my sons, Navy SEALs, both of them are obese.
Obese.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, well, you guys, you stink. I'm not obese. I'm fat, but I'm not obese. Yeah. So anyway, the idea here is we understand food, and we would never project onto another person what we think they ought to be relative to us.
Right.
You should be more like me. Right. But we don't get this on the emotional needs. We don't get it. Right. And so because they're more vague, they're hard to measure. So what I like to do, and here's what I have you do, I keep things simple. On a scale of 1 to 10, just rate yourself in these areas. All right. So just go through control. All right. And give yourself a number. In my life, I'll give myself an 8, or I'll give myself a 4.
And what do you mean by that?
Okay. And so
when you say control, you're rating what?
And don't spend too long thinking about it.
It's usually your first gut thing that happens. Otherwise, you start doing a whole lot of mental acrobats and acrobatics.
So here's what you'll find. You'll say, let's go back to food. I need 2,500 calories a day. And you'll say, well, what do I mean by that? And I'm like, well, mostly I like sweets, and I will start to show my taste.
Right.
I'll show my taste for my food. Right.
Okay.
And so what maybe I don't like food all that much, so I might score myself low, but for these foods, I love them.
So it's when you say control in that respect, you're saying not only do I need these here, but I'm defining the sense of control I want in the fact that I need these particular ones
in these areas.
I want these particular ones.
Yeah, and so when I first did this with Linda, and this is, I can talk about this, and it's not talking behind Linda's back. In our house, Linda is the control person. Like, she needs to know the calendars of the kids. She needs to know bank accounts. She needs to know, we're getting ready to travel this weekend. She goes, I don't really feel good about this because she didn't plan it.
She didn't plan it.
Somebody else planned it, right? And she's like, I don't even know where we're going, And I'm like, yeah, it sounds great to me.
I got a blindfold.
Yeah, exactly. And so she would score herself in the 8, 9, or 10 area, and I, off the cuff, would say, oh, I'm a 5, I'm a 6. That off the cuff, that's what we would say. Right. But here's what we found out. Okay, when I have territories. If she comes in, I like bikes.
Yeah.
I like tools.
Right.
If she messes with my bikes or my tools,
right,
I lose my mind.
Everything else can be going chaotic and everything like that, but right here.
Why did you move that? Why are you doing that? Right. Yeah. And so I get very protective. Like, I have to have that. But she's more protective of a bigger. A wider screen, I'll just say.
She needs more areas of control.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so you go through each of these areas, but you kind of, when you do them, you'll, let me make sure I get clear on this.
Yeah.
You're going to score yourself. You're not going to score your wife, okay? But what will happen is your brain will score her.
Yeah.
Okay? But just score yourself, all right? And you go through each one of these. Love, here's what I give. Respect, here's what I give, all right? And then you want to come together with your spouse, okay? And you just want to start talking and saying, well, what'd you score yourself, okay? And this is where the exchange will start to come up where you, well, here's what I would have thought. That's funny that you scored yourself that, right? Because we have perceptions.
And again, the spouse has not written down your score. This is
it's in her head, probably.
Right. But it's a verbal dialogue you're having now where you're telling the spouse, this is the number I feel that I am, and then they're going to hear that, and then what you're saying is, I didn't see that, or I don't really understand. How does that manifest itself?
I don't understand that, right? And so, because here's where people will start to drill down their taste. Remember, I told you I was a 5 or so in control, but when she touched my toys,
12.
I was like, oh yeah, you're
10.
right. Like I am a control freak in that area. So that's where you start. This is not like a 15-minute conversation, right? This is where we get to know each other more and more. But you start to actually understand the needs of each other, right? The needs of each other in this area. And so,
great points.
Well, this is so powerful because then here's what the deal is. I'm no longer, my goal now, because the two shall become one, right? We are not two left shoes. We're not two right shoes. We are left and right shoe. We are complementary shoes, all right? And so for the two to become one, I have to say, okay, Linda, you say you're a 9 in control, and you've just told me where. Like in particular, she wants the house kept at a certain way. She needs to know. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm much more laid back about that. Right.
Laid back. I'm out. It's like I'm on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's fine.
Yeah. But if I say, well, you're a 9, that's your problem, I'm going to lay here on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm setting myself up for problems.
Right.
Because I'm starving her. Right.
Well, and
I'm starving.
Not only
her.
Starving. I think it goes back what we talked. Your disrespect. You're saying that what your need is not important.
It's not important.
And I had this happen. My wife is very orderly, and I minimized her need as ridiculous.
Yep.
It's like so that's a problem.
What you're saying is, you should be more like me.
Or that's not important.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not saying that I don't know if that makes sense. I may not think that you should be more like me. It's just in this grand scheme of things, you think about everything happening in the world, how important is that? It's important to her.
Yeah. And so, so then our goal really becomes, okay, once we've allowed people to eat the calories they need to eat, right? In each of these areas, hey, just let the person be who they are, right? If they say they're an 8, they're an 8. Like, that's not for you to define. Then my question has to be in each one of these areas, okay, because I love you and I want the best for us, what can I do to help you get what you need? Now, remember, this is a two-way street, right? This is a two-way street. I am going to ask that, but guess what? My wife's going to ask that of me.
You hope.
Well, that's her job, right? That's how this starts to work. This is how we start to make sure that we're balancing each other out without trying to tell the other person they need to be something different, okay? And so this is where, you know what, it's it is not a big problem for me to go, you know what, like this is Linda's domain. This is her nest. What the heck? She loves acts of service. It is no big deal for me to take a whole 10 minutes to run the vacuum over the family room carpet.
Yeah.
Whereas at one time I was like, well, if you want the carpet cleaned, you clean it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we'd be very territorial and selfish.
Right.
And so I do want to talk about respect, and I want to talk about love and respect for a second, because I think this is where we do know now that ladies listen to our show. And so we know that ladies don't understand the significance of respect. Not that they're trying to be disrespectful, but they don't understand the significance of that. And so I've shared this on shows before. And between Linda and I'm the dreamer, okay? I'm the dreamer. I'm the guy who's going to come up with stupid, weird, crazy ideas. Linda's the security person, right?
Yeah.
She's got to make sure the nest and everything's good and secure.
What's this going to do to our
security? My crazy dreams are freaking her out.
Yeah.
Okay? And so because we weren't trained in this, I would share a dream, and she would take it out back and shoot it.
Right.
She
Start
literally
throttling
she would say, "That's ridiculous. That's stupid. That's not practical."
Right.
Right. And she would go through these things. And so what happens to me, all right, contempt in my heart.
Yep.
You know what? Fine. I won't share that with you anymore.
Starts seething
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. And again, I'm just sharing it. This is one. Like, I have poorly loved Linda many times. Why? Because I've loved her the way I thought she should be loved. I didn't take the time to say, how would you like to be loved? You know, I bought her gifts before, and she'd say, okay, but the vacuumed carpet would have been equally good, you know, because this gets a little bit into those love language, but this idea like, I wish you would love me the way I want to be loved. I wish you would respect me the way I want to be respected, and stop trying to make each other eat the calories that the other person thinks
Right.
you should eat,
Right.
right? So when we start to actually do this, by the way, this is a dance. This is not static.
Right.
Right. And so we're trying to not step on toes, and we're trying to get more and more familiar so that we get more into a flow, so that the two of us can read over time. I know what she wants. I know what she needs. Right. This is not a big challenge for me like it used to be.
And I don't know if this is fair to say at this point, but you know, and I've seen this in so many different forms, and my wife has done it, and I do it to her too. That a lot of times we don't realize when they're being disrespectful, and especially with a man, if you disrespect a man enough, you will not get what you need.
Yep.
It will be one of those things that the walls come up, and before long, each person is kind of going the opposite direction. And guys, I hate to say this. I mean, we're really simple, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. If a man brings home a rock, you know, when you're a boy, you'd bring home a rock. That's the best rock you've ever seen.
Yeah.
You know? The guy is just like, here, look at this trophy, you know, kind of thing. But it happens in so many ways that people don't realize, you know, like you said. Is that really smart, you know, to do that? Or is that the way that should be, you know, and the thing is just blown up, you know, kind of
Right.
thing? Guys are very fragile, I'd have to say. And you can say whether they should be that way or not, it doesn't really matter. Just like women tend to need love.
Yep.
And that's what the book Love and Respect is about. You could argue, well, that's not very practical. As a man, you can argue that. But boy, if you don't get that respect, and I suspect it's the same for the woman, if then it goes underground, like you said, and then the wall comes up. And if you're afraid to voice these things, then you won't.
Right.
And you'll be angry about it, and it's caustic.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I like to do this exercise, because sometimes it's not afraid of. It can be afraid to voice, but sometimes I just don't know where to begin. I don't even know what to talk about, right? Like, and so let's go back to the beginning. Seldom do people come into me and say we're divorcing because he's not a good financial provider. But what we do see is, let's go to affection. All right, let's go to affection. In a woman's list, and I'm generalizing here, just bear with me. In a woman's list of affection, I will frequently hear closeness, conversation, communication. Us guys are like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so, but here's what happens, as you talked about before, going underground. If I starve my wife long enough, because we never talk, you know, I never hit the rhythm of talk, right? Never getting any kind of harmony with her on that. And she finds somebody who does. Not even looking for it. Not even looking for it. She just happens to be at work, and she shares a little something, and some guy's like, you know what, I got the biggest kick out of that, and next thing you know, he starts flicking that string.
Oh, I would never do that. And I can't believe your husband's doing those things.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
I can hear it all. You know, you could take a sexual act all of its own. It's not nearly, you know, it'd be devastating. But this kind of thing you're talking about, this emotional entanglement that can happen when somebody's vulnerable. And I learned that from watching people. You've got to take care, back to the taking care of business, because I believe everybody is capable at an opportune time of being vulnerable to something like this without ever intending. You know, that would have never been on their radar. So, yeah.
And we can go across the board. Like, any one of us can struggle in any of these areas. I share the Jeep story. you've heard my Jeep story, but
I don't. Did you share that on here?
I'm sure I have at some point in time, but I always, that's my silly dreaming side. Like, man, it'd be fun to have a soft ragtop Jeep and on this beautiful summer nights just out. And Linda's first response is, that's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. Cause it's like not practical. We don't have the money. Where would the kids ride? All the different reasons why. And I went underground.
Yeah.
Right. I just like, okay. And so you start to shut down. That was 20 years into marriage, by the way. Lynn and I have been married for 37 years. That was 20 years into marriage. So it wasn't like
newlyweds.
We were newlyweds. It wasn't like, but see, these things were slowly eroding. And I share this story because that was like in May or so of that spring. And I never brought it up again. Never brought up the Jeep thing. Okay. And so it was around this time of year. Okay, we were coming into late summer, fall, and we were going to dinner on the other side of Cincinnati. We happened to be coming across on a cross-county highway, and out of nowhere, Linda says, hey, let's get off at the Colerain Avenue exit and check out some Jeeps at the Jeep dealer, or the Dodge dealer right there. And I was like, what? What?
Did you start drinking?
Yeah, exactly. So I dismissed it, and she's like, no, let's go do this. So we pull over, I get off, and we pull into the dealer there, and we start kicking tires and opening doors, right, and just looking around. And about a half hour, and I was like, well, we're not buying anything. So I've seen enough. Let's roll. And so we hop back in the car, and we're driving back towards home, and I just said, what was that about? And I said it in that sort of harsh,
like an appetizer you can't eat.
Yeah, you're playing with me now.
Right.
You're playing games with me. What was that about? And it was totally quiet. And I looked over, and Linda's crying. She's crying, and she said, I am so sorry.
Wow.
I am so sorry.
I don't know that I heard this
She had
part.
just read the book, Love and Respect.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, it just occurred to me that you're my dreamer. Yeah. And I have disrespected you because it didn't make sense to me. Now guess who's crying, right? And so that was eye-opening. And so really, that's when I read the book too, right?
Yeah.
But I have equal stories as to where I have loved her wrong.
Yeah.
I've loved her the way, and when she didn't accept it, I thought she was being unappreciative, right?
Throwing it back in your face, kicking
and I'm
sand.
Like, what do you mean you don't like
I'm doing
this?
my best here. Don't you see that? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Instead of me going, what do you need? Like, what do you want here out of this? Because I read you wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, these are the emotional needs, and these are the reasons more often than the physical needs that we see couples struggle and even the marriage falls apart. And so I just can't, I can't recommend it enough to go through a practice like this, whether you use what we talked about tonight or you have some other way or conversation, like getting to know what the need of that person is on an emotional level. Here's the other thing. If you live in a harsh world, a third world country where just getting physical needs met, they won't even pay attention to these.
This isn't on, and I've heard this about, if you ask people if they're happy, they don't even think in those terms.
Yep.
Life is an existence, and the thought of am I happy or not is really not even on their radar. Happiness, as we look at it, and maybe I'm wrong here, is really a luxury of the Western culture.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time pursuing it, thinking we should be happy, but those people are they just do life. They have to do what they got to do to get by.
Yeah. And so the blessing is that we have the physical needs, but the misunderstanding is that we have a whole nother level then.
Right.
That we have to start to understand and maintain. Maintenance is always taking place here, right? And so we have to maintain that. So anyway, hopefully that made sense to you. I maybe I rambled a bit.
No, you didn't. And now this is sum this up. Take this list.
Yeah.
Right. And just, I haven't been through this, and Linda and I are going to have to do this. My Linda, obviously.
I'll give you a counseling agency.
So you write down, do you just take a piece of paper and write down control and write your number next to it?
Yeah.
And then write down the next one and write your number next to that. And then you two come together and you share these numbers and why you feel that way.
Yeah.
And then this is the discovery. So what's other than that homework, what do you do? I know it sounds pretty self-evident. Once you've gone through this, when you've seen couples that have gone through this, what's the next big hurdle? Obviously, you've got a trajectory. If you've been married a lot of years, you're kind of on this, got this rut that you might be in, and the way you're doing things. What's the next big hurdle you think that people should be ready for if they do this?
Let me get to probably a front runner hurdle. You will have a desire to steer how they scored themselves. They'll say, I gave myself an 8. And especially if you've been any time with them at all, you'll be like, an 8? What do you mean an 8? You're a...
Yeah.
Don't do it. You don't get to put the calories in their mouth. Let them be their own keeper. So that's my first hurdle.
And seek to understand rather than to
tell me why you gave yourself that. Right? Tell me, because like I said, I would have given myself a 4 or 5 on control. But then when we got into some discussion and Linda said, well, you almost bit my head off that time. And I was like, you're right. That's where I learned I'm territorial. Right. And we all are territorial, right?
Well, we got egos and we got pride. And we got all those things. We're all human.
And so part of what this is about, like, just like I have taste in food, I also have taste in each one of these. Like control, well, I have a taste for a certain type of control, like a certain type of food. Right. I have a taste of what affection would look like for me. I have a taste of respect, right, and all of these things. And I need to be really careful of what the movies and entertainment thing has told me what people need, right? And this is where I have. So anyway, with all that being said, then your next step is to, once you sit down and you see where each other is in their numbers, okay, then you seriously, like, and you have to do this with such a genuine heart. You have to say, okay, so what can I do to help meet your need? In other words, how can I go to the store and buy the right kind of food for you?
Deliver that dish.
That's right. How can I do that, right? And or sometimes I have to say, what do I need to stop doing? You know, like I've been
talked about that.
I've been doing this, and so now I have to invite in the whole idea of some truth of saying, you've always done this, and it's just not done what you've thought it has done for me. So this is where you got to let people really express who they are, right? And as I said before, is once you start to lay this out, then it becomes a dance. And when you first learn to slow dance, you step on each other's toes. And when you step on each other's toes, you have to give grace. Because the whole idea that you do this with good intentions. I never intended to step on your toes. That was not my intention. But I'm clumsy.
Right.
Or I've got a habit of the last 40 years of stepping a certain way. And
so real quick, a ship doesn't turn quickly.
Right.
So having the fortitude and discipline to stay with it through the stepping on the toes and all those things, this will not be easy at first. I think this isn't like a magic wand. So people might think, oh, well, we'll do this and everything will be hunky-dory. Great.
Yeah, I don't, I'd even hate to put a time frame on, but I'll tell you, like, when you just become aware, you can then be corrected. Okay. In other words, now that I know that Linda doesn't like these types of gifts, and if I happen to buy that, she could say, hey, remember.
Good point.
So I can be corrected without being shocked or thrown off balance.
Right.
Okay. And she doesn't feel
like, I did it again.
You know what? Yeah. I know better.
I'm learning. Yeah. So it opens the door for that communication going forward too, to say, hey, that's one of those things.
Yep.
Yeah. I real quick, I was on the way home one night and I just thought I'll buy Linda a pair of diamond earrings. I think they were like $1,800 or $1,600. I stopped and I looked around, and took them home. I don't know that I've seen them, but more 4 or 5 times. Linda's just not, so guys, you might be spending a lot of money on things that it's just a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
That's not the food. And picking up the vacuum cleaner was better than diamonds. I can tell you.
So there's responsibility on both people's parts, right? That was not necessarily your fault. It was just never voiced well or heard well.
Well, it's the culture.
Sides.
It's the culture too. De Beers and all that. You see this thing, and you're sold on this idea that this is the way things are supposed to be, and you're marketed into this in Hollywood and everything. Yeah. It's not the reality. Of what this person needs. So you're painting with this broad brush of culture. It's not necessarily true.
So there you go. Those are how we can help provide on a whole different level. Obviously, we're not taking off the table the physical needs. Those never go off the table. But typically, if people are coming in to see us, it is probably because we have somewhere dropped the ball in these areas.
Yeah.
And usually it's a combination, right? Like once you don't love me well, I start to lose trust that you'll ever love me. They're tied together. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say, and this is painting with the brush, and it may not be what your wife needs, but I'm almost going to bet women today need to feel attractive. They need to be what we talked about in Proverbs 31. I don't think there's very many women out there that don't need to be told how beautiful they are. One of the things I probably shouldn't share on here, a lot of mornings I go up, because I wake up before Linda, and I'll go up and I give her these little kisses all over her forehead, and I tell her I love her. And that's the way I want her to start the day, kind of thing. There are very few women that don't need a lot of affirmation and comfort, especially in this culture.
Yeah.
So that's maybe your wife, maybe that's not the food, but I'm going to bet, like we were talking about, picking up the sweeper.
Right.
And I heard one time foreplay begins in the kitchen.
Right.
And
Right.
so there are some things that I think are kind of universal.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing those, that's a part of that thing going back to what I said originally. I wasn't taking care of business at home. So finding out what that business is vitally important.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hopefully, thanks for interviewing me, by the way.
That was a pleasure. I have not done this. So when we talked about this, I think like we talked about at the very beginning, most guys are going to think it's financial.
Right.
It's providing security for the home. So this has been very refreshing for me, and I'm looking forward to doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a work, and it's a continue to be a work in progress. So, hey, if this makes sense to you, and trust me, if you get through and you start to fumble and stumble through it, get some help. Seriously, reach out to me or whatever. You don't even have to set up an appointment, email me or whatever, and I can help walk you through it. It's just not that big of a deal for me. But get yourself some help. Take some time to do this. I think you'll be so much better off down the road as you just start to fortify things between you, because you'll be satisfying needs that, oftentimes you've been starving and you didn't even know it, or she's been starving and they didn't even know it.
I got one parting question.
Yeah.
Should you do this with your kids?
Oh, man. So actually, yes. Okay.
Maybe that's another show.
That's a whole nother show. And here's how I know this. I have screwed that up. Okay. I have screwed that up because they're kids, right? And you make an assumption of I'm the parent, they're the kids, but our kids are all wired so differently. We have one child in our house that affection is huge, and I dismissed it because he's a boy. All right.
So you're painting with a brush, again, culturally and things like that.
And his affection is not hugs. His affection is attaboys. Attaboys, pats on the back,
affirmations.
That's his affection. And you can make him just swell, but here I starve him from it, right? So I'd be very careful jumping into this haphazardly with a 5-year-old. Okay,
right.
But I think as they do start to show some of these characteristics of affection and security and all these things. Maybe I might change the wording a little bit, but these things, emotional needs, are still present in all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see with a daughter or a son.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting to think about. Anyway, wrap her up there.
Yeah. So, guys, we want to thank you for listening to Strong Dads. And, again, share our show. Reach out to us if you need some help, rocksolidfamilies.org. You could contact us at our office at 812-576-7625. So reach out. We'll get you set up there. Our sponsors. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. All right, so that's all I've got. You good?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Thanks.
Go out there and be a strong dad. Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart and Service for being a proud sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. Started in 1985 and going strong for all these years. Recently, Quality Auto Mart has transitioned from owners of Mark and Nancy Repke to longtime employee Fred and Lorraine Venus. For all your automotive needs and golf cart needs, Check out Quality Auto Mart, located across from Indian Lakes on Highway 46 outside of Batesville, Indiana. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.